Hello and welcome to the World Wanderers podcast, your source for travel stories, travel destinations, and travel philosophy.
I'm Amanda.
I'm Ryan.
And we're your hosts. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by italki.com. italki is a great language learning platform that allows you to connect with language speakers from around the world to learn any language that you want to learn. Ryan, when's the last time you used italki?
2.5 hours ago.
And what language are you learning?
So we are going to spend the month of December in Chiang Mai, Thailand. So I am starting to learn a little bit of Thai. And after doing my first lesson today with a guy named Jai, who speaks Thai, I am realizing that learning Thai is going to be a monumental task. Sure.
So if you want to learn Thai with a guy named Jai, visit theworldwanderers.com/italki, italki. Once you sign up for your first lesson, you'll get your second lesson free. Start learning Thai or whatever language you want today.
Hey, Amanda, what is happening on the podcast this week?
This week on the podcast, we have Will Morgan from willfullyliving.com joining us to talk about his experiences quitting his job, traveling the world with his wife, living in a van in Europe and driving through numerous countries, and talking about the idea of living a self-directed life and choosing the things that you really want to do.
Yeah, the word Will uses is living intentionally. Words Will uses. Living intentionally, not just being on a treadmill, not just living a passive life, thinking about what you want and going out and doing it. So many people we talk to on the podcast we relate to, and Will, I think, was on a next level of people that we relate to. His story of coming out of college, starting a new career. He was working in accounting, which is similar to what I did. And just feeling this dissatisfaction as you move on into the years of your career and think, there's got to be something more than this. And then him and his wife chose to quit their jobs, get rid of everything, go travel, reconnect, and get back to an intentional life.
So if you're like ourselves or like Will and you are really wanting to live a more purposeful or intentional life and incorporate intentionality into your career, you should check out the show's featured sponsor, Praxis. Praxis is a 3-month boot camp followed by a 6-month apprenticeship with a really cool startup company where you get to create value for yourself as well as for the business that you're partnered with. Praxis is a great community of like-minded people, and it gives you the opportunity to connect with other people who really want to live a self-directed and purposeful life. To learn more about Praxis, visit discoverpraxis.com, scroll down, click schedule a call, and learn if Praxis is right for you.
All right, we are very excited to be joined by Will Morgan today. Thanks for coming on the podcast, Will.
Yeah, guys, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
So we've really enjoyed checking out your blog, willfullyliving.com, and reading about how travel kind of helped you find your way into a more purposeful life. But I think a really great place to start would be your travel origin story and how you got the idea to go travel the world with your wife and where that trip really came from.
Yeah, so it kind of started, when I tell people about my bucket list in life, it was always number one on my list to travel extensively and for a long period of time and also just a lot of places. So when I first met my wife in college, we both kind of connected over travel. She had been to Russia and Uganda and a few other places abroad, and I had been to every state but Hawaii and Canada and Mexico and the Bahamas. And really, both of us were just drawn to a life on the road and really connected over just a broader cultural experience than what we were finding, where we were going to school in West Texas. And so when we got married, I took a job with a public accounting firm in Denver, and it was a good paying job and prestigious in some way. But it just wasn't a good cultural fit. And after a few years, I was just super depressed and bummed out, just realizing that it wasn't the direction I wanted to go. And my wife could tell I wasn't really happy. And she had a really great career going. She's an actress here in Denver, and her career was going well. But because of our schedules, I was working, really long days, going to work by, 6 or 7 in the morning and coming home at 6 or 7 at night. And she was already gone for rehearsal. So our first 3 years of marriage, we really didn't see each other much. And that was kind of taking a toll on our marriage. And so we kind of were just taking stock one day of where we were at and kind of how our lives had kind of evolved into something different than what we had expected. And I walked in from work one day and she just kind of dropped a bomb and said, "Hey, what would you think about if you were to quit your job and we just go traveling for for a year or so?" And it just kind of happened really naturally and organically. And the next day we went out and bought a map from Barnes and Noble and put it on the kitchen table and decided we were going to travel on a budget. And each of us got 10 pennies and placed them on the map on the places we wanted to go to kind of to figure out what a route would look like, an itinerary and timeline, seasons and all that kind of stuff. And it turned out so every summer since I was in college, this last summer was my 5th season, I've gone up to Alaska to go commercial salmon fishing. And so it's kind of always a summer job that I can go and make pretty good money. And so we knew we could finance it if we started off our travels kind of with that. And so in June of 2015, I quit my job and went back to Alaska, and we had a really great fishing season. It kind of financed our whole trip along with some savings that we had. And so once the salmon fishing season was done in September, we took off to Southeast Asia and just decided to start there. We found a cheap ticket to Bangkok and just decided to do the kind of traditional backpacking around Southeast Asia. And then from there, we decided we were going to go to Europe next. So that's kind of how it all evolved, just kind of as a way to fulfill lifetime dreams together. It was perfect time with no kids and a really good time to kind of refocus on our marriage and our personal goals that we kind of let slip over the past prior years.
Yeah. Yeah. So almost like a mental break from like daily life to go kind of rethink things. And
yeah, almost like a marriage therapy in a way. We always say that marriage was like 10 years, or travel was like 10 years of marriage in a single year. And that was really kind of a focus for us, was just getting our relationship healthy. I mean, it sucked to be newlyweds and for the first 3 years really not have time to know each other and to kind of see each other for our strengths and weaknesses. The polar extremes that you find when you're traveling. So it was a really just intentional move. In retrospect, more intentional than not, but really just a way for us to focus on our relationship first and foremost, without all the outside noise and responsibility that comes with kind of day-to-day life in the city.
yeah, I've got to ask, how did you end up getting into commercial fishing?
Yeah, I was curious about the same thing.
So it was like probably my junior year of college. I had a buddy that had done it, and I was supposed to be doing a bunch of accounting internships. My school was really pushing that you go to the Big Four accounting firms, and I just didn't like it. I interviewed with a few, and I really didn't like the process at all. Didn't like the people that I interviewed with, and so kind of on a whim, I just decided to go to Alaska and try it. So this was 2011, and I just kind of showed up in this fishing village in Alaska, homeless, jobless, and broke. And I found a place to live in a little tree fort out in the woods until I got a job on a boat a few weeks later.
Wow.
And, it was a really fun time. It was kind of the first time I was really on my own, having to like forage for food and shelter and a job and all of these things. And really
Not literally foraging though.
Well, we did. Yeah. The grocery store dumps all their expired product in the dumpster after 10 p.m. And so there's a little group of us that would live up in the woods that would expired yogurt and cereal. Like we hit the mother load on like Captain Crunch bars one time. And
wow.
we lived pretty large on the expired produce and stuff of the grocery store that was still a way to live cheap until you get on a boat. Because once you're on a boat, all your food and room and everything is paid for, since you're just on the boat working constantly. So anyway, so I found a job after a few weeks on a boat, and got passed around that summer between that whole entire family. There's 5 different boats, and I kind of worked for all of them at different points of the summer. And then every summer since, they've had me back in another capacity. And so I really just fell in love with being there in the summertime for a couple months. And, on a good year, you can make a salary that you would make, with a full time job somewhere else. So it can be really lucrative. Sometimes it's not, but it's just a really neat rhythm of life to have the summers up there with the same group of people that come back year after year, and kind of almost mirroring the path of salmon as well, coming back year after year in the summertime. It's a neat rhythm of life, and kind of allow us to work seasonally and then do these other things the rest of the year.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I've heard about people who go up there and fish, and it sounds like a really, really neat experience to have.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things. It's definitely a lifestyle commitment and choice. But it's hard being away from my wife for a couple months every summer. But it allows us to be together the rest of the year, so it kind of makes it worth it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So that's how you finance most of your travels for your 10-month trip?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, we had saved up quite a bit, and before we left, we sold both of our cars and about half of our stuff. So there was, and I would say probably 75% was from Alaska income, and so um, it was definitely kind of a calculated risk that we knew we'd have a good season and be able to do it, but it also kind of dictated how we traveled the rest of the year, and so we were having to be really budget conscious. Knowing that, we had 10 months of travel before the next fishing season and had to make that money last. So it created some great opportunity, but it also kind of restricted us to a time and a certain budget as well.
Yeah, yeah, no, that makes sense. I'm curious, when you guys laid out your 10 different pennies, what were the 10 like top places that you and your wife wanted to go to?
So for me, my kind of bucket list item, I want to go to all 7 continents before I'm 30. So I still have a couple of years left, but so I think I just went, one with every continent, probably like my favorite country in each continent, and then the extra three. I think I probably put like Patagonia, and I spent a summer in New Zealand when I was in college, and so I definitely wanted to go back there and bring Jamie, and so that was definitely high on the list. Surprisingly, Southeast Asia, I don't think got either of our hard-earned pennies, but that was where we ended up going first, just kind of on a whim. And in retrospect, it was kind of one of our favorite places too. So even though we didn't quite plan it in that way, that was kind of one of the places we ended up going.
Was that just like looking around at flights and cost of living and thinking like, oh, this would be a good place to kick it off?
Yeah, so initially we wanted to start with Australia, New Zealand, and thought that'd be an easy way to kind of get into the travel mode, just an English-speaking country, and I knew a lot of people still in New Zealand, so we thought that'd be kind of an easy place to jump into, and then move from there into Asia. But tickets, when we started looking, were just so crazy expensive, and so as we got really creative and trying to find like different legs and one ways that would, multi-cities that would get us there, we ended up finding like really great price, like, $300 round trip tickets to Bangkok from LA.
Wow.
And so, we just kind of jumped on that. And the intention was once we got to Asia, we would just then look for one-way tickets to Australia and New Zealand and kind of work our way down, there. But that just never really happened. We just kind of got to Bangkok and kind of fell in love with, the people and the sights and scenery and food and everything, and just kind of decided Southeast Asia for a while. So we kind of got stuck and ended up really enjoying ourselves.
So what was it like so you and your wife had a discussion, we're like, okay, we're going to quit our jobs and travel. What was it like on the actual day you quit your job? What were the feelings and kind of thoughts running through your head when that happened?
It was really great. What was nice about it? So that conversation with my wife happened in January, and the way that accounting works is January to really May is crazy busy, and so we kind of laid out this plan in January, and that's when we did the map and all of that. And so we had about 6 months to really just dream and process and stoked for it. And so by the time June came, I had already like transitioned out of my job and had passed off things really well and a nice smooth transition out of work and didn't really burn any bridges. And then I just had a couple days to pack up the house, sell stuff, and then take off to Alaska. So, I'm a pretty logically driven guy. So, I didn't really think much about it until like the day that I was walking out of the office, and my wife came and picked me up, and we like took a picture in front of the building, and it just came really real. Like we're quitting our jobs and traveling. Like this is actually happening. And so the next few days were just really a whirlwind of packing stuff up, getting rid of stuff, packing for Alaska, saying goodbye, all that kind of stuff. But the night that we moved out of our house, we were hot and sweating. We'd sold everything, like even our like mattresses and bed and everything. So like we had nowhere to sleep our final night in our house before we moved out, and we had like no shower curtains. We couldn't even shower or anything. It was like no air conditioning. It was really hot, so we were really miserable, thinking like, how are we going to spend this last night together in this crazy hot house without any even a bed to sleep on or anything. So we got on Hotel Tonight and found like this screaming good deal at one of the nicest hotels in Denver. And so on a whim, we just like booked this hotel and showed up, and we looked like crap. I mean, we were sweaty and nasty, like in, grungy work clothes from the day of moving everything. And we went into this like, beautiful hotel lobby and checked in and got a couple side-eye glances from, everyone working there. But we just got into this like amazing, beautiful room and had room service. And it was like one of the most enjoyable nights like either of us can remember. We had these amazing truffle fries that we still talk about like 2 years later, and it's like this incredible night of like, this is actually real. This is actually happening. And it was kind of our first night in a hotel before the whole kickoff of the trip where, 9 months spent in different beds and everything. So it was the first of many exciting times, but that was like the pinnacle of, okay, we've quit our jobs, we've sold everything, and it's just time to celebrate. So
Yeah,
it was a really, really exciting kind of season of life there.
Yeah, I love that. What a fun way to like kick off your like new chapter of your life.
It was definitely the nicest hotel we stayed in our entire trip, so that helps matters as well.
yeah, but it's like it's kind of I can relate to that feeling. Like the day I quit my job before we went to South America, um, even like this past time, like going home for a couple days and then being like, oh crap, we gotta pack. It's really exciting time period right before you leave.
Yeah, there's something about it. I mean, there's so much unknown that I think sometimes if you prepare too much and you kind of know what you're going to do and where you're going to do and how it's all going to play out, you don't get as stoked about it. And so in June, it was kind of like that. It was, I knew I was going to Alaska. I knew we were going to do this and this and this. And then, but really when I came home in September and we had like a week to pack for Asia and we were like getting all of our gear ready and like, we had no idea. We were so busy and we had no idea what we were doing when we got to Bangkok. Like we had the night before we flew to Bangkok is when we like booked like the place we were going to stay when we got in, and we got in like after midnight. So it was like zero plans once we hit the ground in Bangkok, just immediately into like, okay, figure it out today mode. And that was really exciting for me. Was everything had been planned up to that point, but the trip itself was almost entirely unplanned. And that was the source for most of my excitement. Was like, I had no idea what we were getting ourselves into or what's about to come, but we're going to Bangkok, so buckle up.
Do you feel like your travels kind of like lived up to your expectations? Like when you guys got there, were you surprised by like the challenges of travel, or were you like, yes, this is exactly what we needed?
Um, a little combination of both. So the first few months of Asia, it was definitely a challenge and an adjustment, both for us relationally and just day to day. I mean, when you're here, like you're paying rent on an apartment, where you're sleeping, where you're eating, what you're going to do for the day. So there was the transition of like not only figuring that stuff out and moving every couple of days, but there was also the struggle of like how we communicate and how we decide things together. And it took a little while, I think, to figure out what our expectations were. We, I would say we didn't start our trip very intentionally or very mindfully as far as what we wanted out of it, except for we expected it to be like some kind of really transformative experience for both of us. So um, I think that the biggest change and the biggest thing is in retrospect, looking back and realizing the ways that we changed and our ideas of living, that really kind of informed our expectations. And looking back on it now, like my expectation was that it would just change the way I saw the world around me, the way that Jamie and I interact day to day. And in those regards, like it well exceeded my expectations. Um, I think in some regards, just going and traveling for the sake of travel, maybe didn't meet my expectations as much. Like you see it on social media and in just any kind of media that it just seems so glamorous, and there's really not all that much that's super glamorous about traveling long term. I mean, it's just you're always gross and nasty and lugging a bag from one place to another place and standing on a street corner trying to figure out how the heck you're supposed to cross the street without getting hit by motorbikes. Like there's not like a ton that's super, super glamorous that you see. And I think informs our Western expectations of travel and what the world around us is like. So in that regard, I think that travel, and for travel's sake, was different than I expected. And I think that's a good thing. I think that it showed me that life is kind of the same everywhere you go. Life and adventure is kind of location independent, and it's really your mindset and what you're seeking out of it. And so I really found that the biggest adventure for us was just the things that I could learn about Jamie on a day-to-day basis, and how I see her react to different situations, and what that teaches me about her, and how does that let us live in a better connection together and a better understanding of one another. And so travel really helped us in that way, and really met our expectations as far as just changing our mindsets. It was a really kind of beautiful experience in that regard.
Yeah, that's cool. I think that I can relate to everything that you said. It's so interesting. I'd kind of forgotten how unglamorous backpacking was, because we had been, living in the States, and like we took some solo trips, but they were shorter. And it's like I forgot how everything just smells. Like you open your bag and you're like, I haven't worn this since I washed it last, and it smells bad. Like, how is that even possible?
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah. And also, like, you see, like, social media just does, like, such a good job of capturing, like, the glamorous aspects of things, like the visuals, like where you're at a really cool beach, but it doesn't capture, like, the overwhelming heat, or, like, the smell from the funky restaurant that's behind you, or, like, how your stomach feels upset because, like, you ate something funky.
Or how you, like, sweat off your face for, like, an hour in, like, a dirty taxi to get there or something.
Yeah. Yeah, but there are all these, like, that's the thing I think we both loved about it was you kind of throw yourself back into, like, beginner's mind, or, like, into all these challenges every day, and it just becomes a lot more fulfilling because you are doing things like speaking a different language and trying to get something done, or, like, crossing the street in Vietnam, or just throwing out of your routine into something that's challenging, and you're kind of pushed out of your comfort zone a lot more often than you otherwise would be if you were at home. And then on the relationship side, because you are traveling with a person who, if you were at home and doing your routine, you don't really see yourself as getting tested all that much. But when you're together and you're doing things like getting onto a busy train and trying to find a spot to put your bags, or
Right.
stuck in a bus station with no idea what to do and someone has to take initiative, you put yourself into, like, situations where you're tested in a way that you never do on a day-to-day basis when you're at home. Like, maybe it will happen when a relative passes away or something like that, but you don't really get to see and adapt on the fly as much as you do.
Well, I think it's like a physical representation of, like, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Like, in our Western world, we're so safe and secure, and like our lodging and food and safety and all that is like provided, and like we don't even think about it day to day. But then when you go somewhere abroad and that safety layer isn't there, like majority of your time is spent on that bottom level of his triangle, like all of your physiological and safety needs, and like those have to be met before you can worry about like love and belonging and esteem and self-actualization or anything like that. Right. So I think that there's this break in our mind that like we're so used to having things provided for us that all of a sudden they're not provided, and you have to forge for yourself, like kind of going back to the thing in Alaska, like having to learn, where to sleep, like finding a tree house to sleep in as my best option until I could get a job on a boat, or like, dumpster diving for food to like be able to save money. Like you kind of see the human necessity for, food and shelter and all those things really do take priority to your own emotional needs or ideas. And I think that only gets left out a lot, just how hard the struggle is to find those kind of fulfillments on those lower levels of the hierarchy of needs.
Yeah, and it is interesting because I feel like we're kind of programmed for satisfying those needs to feel more fulfilling than when you, just to explain, like some days I feel like if I go out for a walk and like find a restaurant and get something to eat and come home, like I unconsciously feel better than if I sit at my desk and like get a lot done. Like maybe I write a couple of things or like finish a project on my computer. Just like physically moving and like eating or finding something new kind of like unconsciously feels better. And it feels like we're almost like programmed to have meeting those base needs be more fulfilling than meeting some of those higher needs.
Yeah, I think it's true. And I mean, there's definitely a beauty, if you have everything below it provided for, that you can worry about self-actualization and like your real deep emotional needs. Like that's fantastic if you get to that level. But there is just an intrinsic value of, hey, I ate 3 meals today all by myself, and I ordered in another language, and I made it across the city or across the country or across multiple countries safely. And that's something worth being proud of. And like maybe in the US or Canada, like if you make it across the city on the city metro, like no big deal. But when you do it in, Bangkok or, Shanghai or something, like there is something more gratifying about that experience. That kind of adds a little bit of beauty to the experience, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree with that for sure.
So one of the interesting, maybe like one of the inherently valuable things I think about travel is that it pushes you outside of your comfort zone. But while you are traveling, you do have to make a choice, because there's a lot of times when you can choose to be really comfortable. If you go into a big major city anywhere, you're going to be able to find like a super westernized area that's very comforting. Or maybe you can choose to go to more rural places where you're not in your comfort zone at all. And a lot of times the personal growth comes from pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone. How did you kind of handle that balance while you were traveling?
So Jamie and I are both pretty introverted. We're not big party people. Well, yeah, we're not really people either. So we really we really like our time just kind of in solitude and observing everything that's going around us. So as we were traveling Southeast Asia, we challenged ourselves in a number of ways. But we also didn't feel like the traditional backpackers in a sense. So we found that we could, stay in 2 and 3 star hotels cheaper and have our own private bathroom and everything all across Asia by staying in hotels rather than in hostels. And so we kind of made that decision early on that we would just do hotels through like agoda.com or something. And so we found some really good deals that fit our budget. And so we did kind of hotels. So that kind of limited the amount of time we spent with other people. But we kind of pushed ourselves in other ways. Like I had ridden a motorbike when I was a kid, but we decided that like that was the cheapest and best way to get around. So like all across Asia, we would just rent motorbikes everywhere. And I, got more comfortable as we went by kind of getting out of our comfort zone, driving to places that weren't necessarily tourist areas, but just looked interesting, or we took a wrong turn and we just didn't bother turning around just because we were curious what was further down the road. And so that kind of curiosity, I kind of say there's a case for curiosity of just trusting your curiosities and following them. And that led us into a lot of areas outside of our comfort zones and where we didn't expect, took us to places we didn't expect to end up. Another example of kind of reactionary to that was, so we realized that like we didn't like bouncing from hotel to hotel every couple days. We really like having our own space where we can unpack our bags once and be settled. So sometime in December, we decided we were kind of looking at our Europe trip, and we had 5 months in Europe, and we decided that the best way that we wanted to see everything, the best way to see everything that we wanted to see was to kind of consolidate our transportation, our lodging, and our food all in one thing. And so what we ended up doing, rather than doing a Eurorail and hostels and trying to find restaurants or whatever, is we found a really cheap off-season motorhome rental in Germany. And we rented a motorhome for 5 months and decided to just drive all across Europe. And so that really put us out of our comfort zone because, you're talking, we covered 16,000 kilometers in 22 countries in Europe in 5 months. And it was perpetually outside of our comfort zone, trying to find places to park safely and sleep without getting moved on by police or broken into, or, finding places to park in big cities that we wanted to go into. And there's, several nights we just like paid for a meter and like parked next to a hospital in London. And like would just find these crazy places to park, this amazing scenic overlook in the Scottish Highlands and so many other cool places that we were able to park. But traveling, I would say alternatively, whether by motorbike or by RV, just led us down a bunch of different paths. So many roads that we knew probably Americans hadn't driven on since World War II, if anything, like crazy one-way roads way out in the middle of nowhere. And so that really put us into a position of trust for each other and for ourselves. Just that no matter what circumstance we were in, however foreign it was or however different the driving rules were from country to country, like that we were just going to figure it out. So I think a lot of times travelers see, getting out of their comfort zone by like meeting other people or like, doing these crazy adventures. But for us, it was just traveling, using different modes of transportation than what maybe most people would, and allowing ourselves to kind of just intentionally get lost, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's amazing. It sounds like it was quite an adventure to travel in an RV across Europe.
Yeah, there's so many cities in Europe where Amanda and I have been like walking around and just been like, I would never want to be involved in the car here because it seems way too crazy.
Yeah, so our van was like 6 meters long and like 2.5 wide, and so it was a substantial vehicle on the roads of Europe. Especially like Belgium was the worst. I think Belgium and Italy were both really difficult with a vehicle that size. But I often tell people like I think my proudest accomplishment in life was the day that we returned the van without a single scratch on it or any kind of damage. And when I walked into the office and gave the keys back to the guy and told him, there's no damage, he kind of just looked at me and went out, like without saying anything. I walked outside and just looked around, and then he went and checked the mileage, and he kind of read it and realized it was like 16,000 kilometers and just started chuckling. And he was like, and no damage. Like it was almost as if like the office had taken bets about this, young American couple and how much damage or how long until they called with some kind of horrific accident. But there was some definite close calls, but a lot of fun. we kind of saw all the wild places of Europe. Cities were really difficult, and so we spent most of our time just in the countrysides and kind of in more of the natural beauty places in Europe. And we definitely saw a bunch of cities, but more like a day or two in each city, and then we would spend a few weeks just like parked up, next to the ocean or a river, or in the Scottish Highlands or wherever. So it was a lot of fun. There was some wild experiences that came along with it. I think I would do it again, probably not in the winter. Being in the winter was one of the hardest things because so many campsites are closed, and we'd run out of fresh water, but all the water faucets, within a 100-kilometer radius are all like frozen, and every country has its own propane bottle and type of fitting. And so every time we were running out of propane, like once a week with our heater and our cooking stuff, we had to like get super creative on the strategy of like how much propane to use and when, and how do we refill it and where. And so it was perpetually in those bottom levels of the hierarchy of needs. Like it was pretty much the entire trip of safety and physiological needs trying to be met day to day. But it also kind of insulated us and just let us have a ton of time just to talk and dream and just spend really intentional time in the van. Some days when we were really burnt out and tired, in Asia, we would just feel like it was a waste to not go and do something. But with the van, there would be days that we would burn out and tired, and we would just close the blinds and read a book. And I bought a cheap guitar, and we would just, play music and take naps and just relax in our own little space. And we called it La Tortue Blanche. It's French for the white turtle. It was just this big white slow thing, and we always call it turtling ourselves in when we closed all of the blinds and we're just kind of closed off to the outside world. So it was a fun experience. It was definitely unique, and allowed us access to a lot of places we wouldn't have had otherwise. But yeah, definitely an adventure.
So after you went from Europe or from Southeast Asia to Europe, and then what did you do after Europe?
So I got home, and 2 days later I went back to Alaska to fish.
Okay.
Yeah. So we planned it out. The original plan. So, we had planned to travel for like a year and a half, maybe 2 years. So our original plan was Southeast Asia. We came back for like 2 weeks for Christmas and a family wedding, and then went straight to Europe, like via Iceland and then Denmark, and then to Germany, where we picked up the van, like in January. So the original plan was, after Europe, I went back to Alaska, and we were going to have a fishing season. And then the plan after that, we were kind of thinking would be to do Australia, New Zealand, and then come home for Christmas again, and then finish kind of our 2-year trip in South America. And so that was kind of the direction we were thinking. But when we got back from Europe, both of us were kind of tired and traveled out for a little while. It was just a really, intense and long trip for us. And so I went back to Alaska, and this last year we had the worst fishing season in 40 years. So I made like a tenth of what I had made the summer before, and financially, like, it just wasn't feasible for us to keep on traveling, which was, I think, kind of a relief in a lot of ways to both of us, because we kind of realized how much we kind of like being in a consistent place and with community, especially with other people and things we know. So while those other places are definitely high on our list, and we really anticipate getting to them in the next couple of years, it was kind of neat to see that circumstances all kind of aligned to bring us back here to Denver just for a season and kind of take things a little slower for a change. So
Yeah, that's something that we can both relate to too. It's like travel is so amazing and it gives you so many great things, but it's nice to go home and kind of like settle in a little bit. We don't like to get too settled because, I don't know, routine gets a little bit like monotonous, I guess, but like finding ways to like keep travel alive in day-to-day life or at home and that sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we got an apartment here in Denver for another year, but like we haven't bought any furniture. Like if you could see my room right now, it's I'm sitting at my desk and then there's literally just a huge empty room behind me with like one chair in it. And we can't bring ourselves to like accumulate a bunch of stuff now that we've done without it for so long. And we anticipate like having that chance to travel again soon. So it's hard to get resettled when you know you're not ready to resettle, but at the same time, there's definitely something comforting and grounding about having a place and people that know you and that love you, and where you can come home, after a day of work of some kind of consistency. There's something about rituals and things that are familiar that are just really grounding and I think important that you can't always find on the road. And some people do, and I admire the people who can travel for a decade on end, just perpetually with new people and new experiences and new places. I just find that kind of exhausting, and for now it's nice to have a place where I feel like I belong for this particular season of life.
Yeah, definitely.
So in a previous conversation, you had mentioned having dengue fever when you were in Southeast Asia. What
Yeah.
what was that like? What was the story behind that? Like, how did it kind
Oh,
of come on
yes.
and the whole experience?
That sounds
So we had
horrendous.
been on Koh Lanta. It's an island kind of near like Koh Phi Phi and everything
Yeah.
in Thailand. And we went for this jungle hike. We rode our motorbike out and through tribes of monkeys that are sitting around the road and all of that. Troops of monkeys rather, all around the road. And so we went on this hike, and I'm guessing it was on that hike that I got bit by a mosquito, and we knew that there had been some outbreaks of dengue fever and everything, but like didn't really know anything about it or think anything of it. And so we left Koh Lanta and went back to Bangkok, and we had some friends that put us up in a room for a couple nights before we go on to Cambodia. Um, and that night, so it was, I'm from Texas, and I grew up a big baseball fan. So I'm a big Texas Ranger fan, and I know you guys are from Canada. So hopefully this isn't a sensitive topic, but the Rangers were playing the Toronto Blue Jays, and I'm really into baseball. So it was like 3 a.m, and I decided to wake up and watch this baseball game while we were, in our room in Bangkok. So I like stayed up, and it was like this epic game of the series last year, and I think it finished like 6 a.m. or something. And I went to bed. The Rangers lost, and it sucked. And I went to bed tired and frustrated. I had stayed up that long. And the next day, I woke up in the most like agony of my life. I was just sweating and had an incredible migraine. I couldn't open my eyes, and my whole body was just like aching and had these like hives on it. And it was really scary, and we kind of thought about going to the hospital. We had travelers insurance and everything, but it's scary when you're sick in a foreign place, and we didn't really know what to do. And so we kind of started reading through all the symptoms and realized that it was dengue fever, and we had some other friends there that kind of confirmed that's probably what it was. And so basically for a week straight, I would just sleep like 20 hours a day, and Jamie would just go to like a nearby coffee shop and read and write, and just she was amazing. She would bring me food and cold rags for my head, and I was running like a crazy fever, and just like the sickest I've ever been. So basically within a week, I had lost like 30 pounds and
Whoa.
was just really not doing too great. And but I was on the up, on the rebound there, on the upswing. And so we went to Singapore, and like I remember walking through the Singapore airport, and I almost passed out, like on the way to immigration. I was just like not doing well. So yeah, I call it the dengue diet, because in the end, we started off our travels. I had put on some weight in public accounting, and while I was in Alaska, and so I kind of wanted to lose some weight on our trip anyways. And between all in Southeast Asia and then getting the dengue diet, it was miserable for a week. But I mean, if anyone's out there's looking for a great diet plan, there's some mosquitoes in southern Thailand that could probably help you out. So
Jesus.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
no one actually please follow that medical advice. That's terrible advice.
It's not authorized by the World Wonders
No.
podcast.
Yeah, we are not doctors.
It sounds like a terrible experience.
Yeah, it was nice that it helped us slow down for a while, and we had some wonderful friends in Bangkok that put us up for free. So it was just really just more than anything, just a waste of a week sitting in a room sweating. But it allowed us to slow down and just kind of develop some better friendships with these guys that put us up. So in the end, it wasn't all lost, but it was definitely an interesting situation.
Yeah, for sure. Being sick abroad is always really scary. It's like those times where you just want to be in like the comforts of your own home, like with your family doctor nearby and like your friends who can bring you whatever you need and like all of that sort of stuff.
Did you ever feel like, I wish I hadn't been in Thailand and I had been somewhere where there weren't mosquitoes carrying all sorts of crazy diseases?
No, I mean, so I was sick and miserable for a week, but it was such a fun, I don't want to say fun experience, but like the process of when I think I got it, like we had so much fun on that hike. It was like in the national park, like in the southern part of Koh Lanta. It's like just a really gorgeous spot, and there was monkeys everywhere. And then like it opens up to this beach, and we were the only ones out there. And it was such a fun experience, that whole thing, that it was kind of like, okay, like we had so much fun, like, maybe we just had it coming that something bad should happen, just because it shouldn't be allowed to have this much negative repercussions,
Yeah.
Like,
it's like the price was too low at first.
Yeah, exactly. Like you have to pay a price for that much fun. So I don't really regret it. I mean, anywhere you go, there's going to be issues. And it wasn't that big of a deal in the end. I would do it all again in a heartbeat, and, hopefully not lose 30 pounds again, but like I would do it all again in a heartbeat to have that experience. The further we've been from Southeast Asia, the more we've kind of realized just how much just pure fun we had throughout the whole time we were there. It was just a lot of good times.
Yeah, no, that's amazing to hear. I'm curious, when did you decide to start your website and your blog?
It was pretty early on. So, we decided to travel like January of 15. And I think I started off the process of like my first iteration sometime like maybe in like May or something like that. It was more of just initially, I wanted to keep my mom up to date with, what all we were doing and where we were. But I also I kind of wanted to see, knowing that my focus for our travels was to have my ideas of living change. I kind of wanted to have a benchmark every time I blogged to kind of see where my mind was in different places that we were and what we were doing and kind of how that was informing my ideas. So it was really more of a personal journal. But I knew if I just kept my own personal journal, I wouldn't really be very accountable to that. And so I figured by making it public, it would allow people kind of into our space and kind of build in that community that we knew we were kind of going to be missing while we traveled. And it would also kind of hold me accountable to posting regularly and coming up with ideas and thinking deeper about our experiences rather than just kind of bouncing from thing to thing and adventure to adventure without really going very mindfully into those. Mm-hmm. So that was my hope, was that it was more of a journal into my own mind. I kind of call it my data dump sometimes when my mind gets going on too many topics or ideas, or if I see kind of common themes, I would just try to put it on the blog to clear my head of it and keep processing what was going on around me. The more we traveled, the more difficult it was to find the time and the motivation to write. And at least publicly, I spent much more time writing privately the longer our trip went on than I expected. So kind of the idea and the focus of my blog really changed as we went, and it kind of became more of just like updating friends and family where we were and what we've done, especially in Europe. But it still kind of was a place for me to just think deeper and try to give something to others that were following along. Drawing ideas from the things we were experiencing and some of the harder stories or experiences, writing about what they taught us, whether it was sharing a lot of time with a refugee family in Thailand, or visiting the war museum in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, or whatever it was. Like there was all these different experiences that I knew other people back home could resonate with, and could benefit from thinking about deeper. And so for me, it was really just a way to initially just document our journey and think about things deeper. And then as it went, it became less so. And it's kind of pendulum swung back around to where now I'm writing more regularly than I ever have, even though I'm not traveling, as I'm processing these ideas and seeing, by being back in a familiar context, I'm able to see, kind of measure myself against my old self in the same place and see how different I am and what has actually changed in my mind. So it's kind of like Denver is a measuring stick, and from the last time I was here to now, there's a lot that's different in my own ideas and in mine and Jamie's relationship, and how we think and act. And so that's giving me a lot more clarity and topics to write about weekly, about the things that travel really informed in me and instilled, that I didn't really realize at the time and couldn't have been blogging about at the time. And only in retrospect are those lessons becoming more and more clear.
So if people at home are thinking about going on a big or long backpacking trip or just adventure in general, but from not because they want to see a bunch of places as much as they want to get a good personal development experience out of it, what are some of the things you would do or like would recommend or maybe would do differently if you were starting again to really maximize the personal development side of travel?
I think that so much of it is getting outside of your comfort zone, kind of like we talked earlier, doing things that don't seem like the common avenue. What people would expect you to do when you're traveling, like go down a side street and meet someone, or find some other connection that's outside of what you would expect. So just as an example, one of the ideas that really has struck home for Jamie and I is just our ideas about refugees in today's world. And neither of us really had too much of a grid for what was going on in the refugee crisis. Jamie had done a show about Jewish refugees during World War II, and she was here in Denver, and had done some tutoring of refugees in West Texas, but neither of us really realized the scale of what's going on in the world today. And when we were in Thailand, we had some friends that worked at a church that we kind of knew, some mutual friends. And so one Sunday we decided to go to this church and kind of meet these mutual friends. And when we got there, like we walked into this church service and the left side of the entire auditorium was Thai, and then the right side was all Pakistani families, and they all had it was like headphones on, and listening to the service translated into English, and we thought it was really interesting. So we started, afterwards talking to all these families that were refugees from Thailand or refugees from Pakistan living in Thailand, and find out that, Thailand doesn't recognize the UN asylum seeking status. And so there's all of these Pakistanis that arrived in Thailand and then overstayed their visas, and they're basically illegal immigrants. And churches and other organizations are kind of hiding them underground to like keep them safe. But it's like a 5-year process to be approved to be resettled in, Canada or America or the Netherlands or the UK. And so we learned so much about the refugee process and their struggles, not being able to go to school or for the parents to be able to work, and, having gone from really nice jobs in Pakistan to coming to Thailand and not being allowed to work for 5 years. Like it's really heartbreaking to see some of their experiences, but they're also some of the most hospitable, welcoming, loving people we've ever met. And so just having those experiences, we didn't expect to encounter refugees of any variety, like while we travel kind of on the typical backpacking trail. But that experience connected us with them, and there's still a family that we connect with, and we're able to like help the girls go to an English school, and have stayed really close in touch with as they struggle to be relocated to a safe country. And, so that played really into our ideas, especially as, American politics. Like there's been certain rhetoric against refugees in the last several months. And it was really heartbreaking for us to come back and have had those experiences and these ideas of the world around us and the beauty of these people and what they're seeking, who these, quote unquote refugees are, putting a face to a name and kind of a label of a people group. It really changed our ideas on who these people are. And it's not a political issue. It's more of a people issue and a very close to our heart issue. And so there were multiple issues like that and ideas that really informed our ideas. I think the best thing, if someone wanted to have a really intentional experience, more kind of personal development wise, like obviously reading goes a really far way, and take an iPad or a Kindle with you and just read as much as you can, on buses and trains, but don't miss the opportunities just to talk to people that are there and ask them their experiences and what their lives are like. And I think that the beauty of travel is it connects you to so many different perspectives, allows you to see things in such a different way. There's other times that we were able to sit around a dinner table with a German, a Russian, a Japanese girl, a guy from France, us, a Slovakian, and a Dutchman. And all of us had conversations, and we sat and talked for probably 5 or 6 hours about World War II and politics. And, you got pretty much all of that, like Axis powers of World War II. And then, a Frenchman and us as Americans, like talking about World War II for hours on end. And it broadens your perspective and your ideas of why people make decisions historically and today the way they do. And you realize how much culture and other ideas play into it. And I just think opening your minds up to other people and experiences up to other people, and not just going for the tourism sites and sceneries, but really trying to connect with people in different places is really, there's no substitute for personal development. It's a horizontal connection that really helps you see more inwardly, I think.
Yeah, I think we both 100% agree with that. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. So Will, we want to be respectful of your time here. Where can people find you on the internet if they want to connect more?
The internet. So I'm on Instagram and Facebook. Instagram is Willfully Living, and then primarily I blog every Sunday afternoon or night. I'm trying to be consistent with at willfullyliving.com. I'm back in Denver, not really traveling, but a lot of it is just ideas on living intentionally and building a life of habits and goals, and really pursuing something worth pursuing. Spending your life doing. It's a really beautiful thing, and an attitude and perspective are really such important things in our life. So I'm kind of blogging about that right now, and hope that I can see some of you guys there, and I would love to connect with anyone that's out there.
Awesome.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time today, Will.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you guys. I'm really a fan of the podcast and really thankful you guys had me.
To find more information, relevant links, and photos talked about in this week's episode, check out theworldwanderers.com.
If you have a question, comment, or feedback, send us an email at info@theworldwanderers.com. Join our community on Facebook at The World Wanderers or on Twitter at WorldWanderers1. As always, thanks so much for listening.
Have a great day.
Bye.